Hi there, this is Jacqui at the Studio for Art and Craft in Cobleskill, New York. And today I'm going to walk you through the steps to do this new design of ours. I call it Snow Burst. Kind of reminds me of I don't know why, snowball. Reminds me of a lot of different things if I stare at it long enough. This is on a black plate background with three colors, the blues and the white. But I do want to tell you that if you order the kit, which includes a base-coated plate with the markings on it, you can, even though we assume you're going to get it with these colors, there's a spot there where you can indicate that you want other colors. But this would look good in a ton of different combinations. So you do you, as I like to say. So I mentioned your kit, right? What your kit is going to come with is your base-coated plate with the markings on it. This is what it will look like. You'll get a little pods with your colors, your glazes. It'll come with a paper placemat, and the paper placemat obviously protects your work surface a little bit. Glaze is good stuff, and then once it dries, it pretty much brushes out of everything. But what I really like about the paper placemat is that it gives you something to pick up and turn rather than turning your plate on top of it. If you do that, you're likely to rub off some of the base coat glaze on the back. And one of the interesting things, we have 3 coats of glaze on here, and I can't tell, just to be honest, if you've rubbed off one of those layers, okay? It won't look any different dry, but it will look different when it's fired. So I ask you, if you don't want to pick up your placemat and turn that, at least pick up your plate and turn it and place it back down rather than just dragging it. I happen to be working on a banding wheel to turn it. You can sort of hear it go. If you have like a Lazy Susan or something like that, you can use that. It's really good idea to turn your plate as you go, and I'll be explaining that. So what did I tell you? Okay, so the only thing I haven't pointed out, you'll have a paper towel that you want to make sure is damp, and then you will have already owned or have purchased this tool, which is what I use to make the dots. This is an 8-tip tool, which makes it very convenient. Starts with tip number 1, the smallest one, and goes all the way around to tip number 8. If I wasn't clear, you can purchase one of these when you buy your kit, just so you know. You don't have to go searching for them. They're actually made by a company that I work with, and I don't even think you can buy them on the general market yet, or I don't know if you'll ever be able to. So anyway, very exciting stuff. So this is what you'll have to get started with. You'll use that paper towel to clean off your tips. And we have 2 different kinds of steps on this. We have dots and drags today, so which I think you could see, but I'll show you how to do both. So we're going to jump right in and get started. We're going to use our largest tip, tip number 8, and we're going to start with the white paint. One of the key things about this is remembering the difference between white and light blue. They look very similar, so when you get your kit, they're labeled. And mostly they look similar when they're wet because the white has a little bit of a blue tint in it, so that if you were painting on a white background, you'd be able to see it. So we're going to just go ahead and put a large single dot in the middle. Now, I want to show you something. If you notice, I'm going to find a pointer here, that this has a little bit of I'll call it a skip over here. Because when we do the markings, they're etched in, that'll sometimes happen. 99.9% of the time, that flattens itself out during firing. If yours is particularly bad, what I don't want you to do is to try to push the paint in that direction. You'll just end up getting your circle out of whack. So if your circle, for some reason, your dot comes out small, just add more to the middle. Just tap, tap, tap in the middle, okay, until you get it the way you like it. The fact that this isn't moving doesn't really bother me because I know it will be rounded when it comes out of the kiln. All right, so that's step 1. We're now going to switch over to tip number 6. Ooh, a big one. And for some single dots. But you'll notice that there's 2 circles. One right here and one out here. I don't know if you can see them on the video, but you should be able to see them on your plate. We're actually going to work on the second one first. So we're going to use tip 6 with the light blue, and we're going to put a single dot at the intersection of the ray and the circle. Okay? And again, this is the part where as I turn, I can just turn my plate because it's on a banding wheel, but if you're turning, you should lift up either using your placemat or your plate and turn that. I do a lot of turning because I try to always dot from my side of strength. I'm left-handed, so I do all my dotting on the left. The other reason I like to turn for every, just about every dot is because, I want to say this, if I do a dot here and then I do it over here, my hand's in a different position and there's a greater likelihood that the dots will come out significantly different. So I just try to dot essentially in the same place. So if I'm dotting here, I turn the plate so I'm dotting in literally in the same location, because the plate has moved, not my hand. I think that makes sense. And now we're going to, the last thing on the inside we're going to do is take tip number 3 with the same light blue color, and we're going to do what I call triangulating, which is you're going to, let me get my pointer to show you. So you have this dot and this dot. We're going to make a triangle, right, just between them on this inside circle. So I think that makes sense. It's right in between, kind of like a big nose or something. I don't know what you want to call that. So I'm going to do that with number 3, and I'm going to do that all the way around. What you want to try to do, this is a great example of what you want to try. These are definitely, because of they're right on the line like that, they have a little bit of whack to their shape, which, as I said, will come out. Always try to dot when you can, literally straight up and down. You'll notice on these that I did, I was a little bit on an angle, and it shows. So what I'm going to do is I went to a smaller tip. I'm going to go to the smallest tip, and I'm just going to lightly touch down to try to round them out. And again, that's just that tapping thing I was talking about, okay? If you do too much, what's going to happen, right? I'm just going to pour a little paint over there, okay. Nope, it's going to take care of itself in the kiln. Okay, so that's our center. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move to the darker blue, and we're going to take, we're going to make the long rays above these large dots, okay? Above just the 4. So if I have this pointed here away from my body, I'm going to call that north is my point. And so I'm going to just do north, east, south, and west. So I'm going to start with tip number 8, the biggest tip in the dark blue, and I'm going to make, probably start with about 3 dots, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to do, this is called dot, dot, dot. Very, very cleverly named. So I'm just going to stay on the line. I'm going to leave enough room above that first one so I didn't hit it. So dot, dot again, and dot again. By doing that, I automatically get 3 successively smaller dots. Now, I don't want to do it again because I know I'm just about out of glaze on that tip. So I'm going to clean off that tip, and then I'm going to go down to tip number 5, because if you think about it, this is essentially 8, 7, and 6. So now I'm going to go down to tip 5, and I'm going to do about 3 more. We'll see how many I'm going to do. So that's going to be 5, 4, 3. I think I can do them all. 2, 1. I did it. Sometimes you can, sometimes you don't. And then my point is, if you didn't, you would just switch to a smaller one. So I'm going to do it again because I need 4 of them. So 8, 7, 6. And then jumping down to 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So yes, I was able to get it on that one as well. 8, 7, 6. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then the last one. 8, 7, 6. Now see, I can see right away that that one wasn't, I didn't have as much glaze. So I'm just going to take my tip 6 and add a little bit more to that before I jump to tip 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay? Okay. So those are our 4 rays. Come back to our beginning here. And then also using tip 8, but switching over to the white, we're going to put one large circle above each of these in between. Just want to go out a little bit further than these because we're going to be dotting around this dot. So this is what I mean. So I'm just going to come out just a little bit further so that when I'm done, I have room underneath to go around. I'm going to say remember, this is a big dot, right? So you definitely want to allow for spread. So I don't know, when I'm done, there's about 1/4 of an inch in between. So you're probably going to go out closer to 1/2 an inch. Not exactly. I got to be honest, I didn't measure it. So I don't know exactly. I kind of do it by eye. But my point is, better to go out a little bit more than to go too close and either not leave yourself room in here or have them run into each other. If you have dots that run into each other, it's not the crime of the century. I can easily show you how to fix that at the end. That's the key thing. You've heard me say this if you've watched other videos. Do not try to fix anything until everything's dry. Once your glaze is dry, it's really easy to correct mistakes, and I'll be able to show you that at the end. But if you try to correct it while the glaze is still wet, you'll mostly just probably smear the heck out of it. All right, so now we're going to start with our, I always call them teardrops, even if they're round. These ones are rounder, so just bear with me while I call them teardrops. We're going to go around these big dots. So we're going to start with the white again, around the white dot. And we're going to start with tip number 2. And here's how I do this, okay? I start at the top on the line, and then I come around. And then I'll put 1 on the line on the bottom. So really in this case, I have 4 on the side. Now, here's the key thing. If I dip in with tip 2 again and come over here, there's a high probability that my dot would be this big, right? Because that's what it was last time. So I actually, for the second side, I drop down to tip number 1. Sorry, I turn a little bit because, again, I always dot comfortably from my left. So this way in tip 1, it's likely to be this size. So 1, 2, 3. And you know what? I only got 3 on that side. That's fine. Not the hill to die on. It matters more that you don't try to squish things in than it matters that they're all the same. In fact, in my experience, I find that I don't even know if I'll be honest, I don't even know if I've ever done a design where they were literally all the same, especially when I have as much circle dotting, if you will, or teardrops as this one does. And it doesn't matter whether you go, which side you do first. Okay, this one I kind of moved it, I just flipped it and did the right side first because I had it upside down already. So that's your first around, if you will. All right, and now we're going to go up to tip 3 and do the same thing with the same color, so the same white. So tip 3. The only difference is we're going to be stopping before we get to this big dot here. That's going to be our end mark. Because we're not going around again. You can control the size of your dots 2 ways. I was thinking whether there was a third way. I mean, I suppose there is. But the 2 main ways you can, even if you're new to this, is by how much you dip and how hard you dot. I tend to dip hard and dot lightly. So I'm going to go on to the next step, which is tip number 4, using the light blue color. All right, it's the same process, just a different color, which you can hardly see. Here's the reason I do that. I like to have a lot of glaze on my tip so that I have the most options. But if I do it lightly, as I like to say, I can always add more. But if I dot too heavily, I can't add less. I know, it's deep and philosophical. What can I tell you? You don't just get dotting instructions from me. You have a whole new way to look at life. All right. One of the things about doing this on the video is you can always, you know, pause me while you get caught up, so you can really feel comfortable going at your pace. I mean, I try to dot somewhat slowly for me so that you can see as much as possible, but I also don't want you to think that you have to go the same pace I'm going at. All right, we're also going to do tip number 5 in that same light blue color. Now, you'll notice that sometimes when you get to these larger tips and you have like so many dots going around, you might start running out. So in which case, I'm not going to force it. I'm going to go down to tip 1 now and do a light little dip. Now, I also don't start fresh because tip 1 will likely be bigger. I kind of back up a little and lose a little bit of paint, as the way I describe it, on some of the early dots, so I get a nice, even, consistent shape. So let me show you that on this side. I'm not going to show you on this side because this side I had enough glaze to go around. I can't show you something if it doesn't exist. So let me try this side. Yeah, I'm going to run out over here. Shoo. So I'm running out, so I'm going to jump down to tip number 1, grab some paint, but I'm not going to start as if I just continue. I'm going to come back and, I call it lose a little, redot these 3, and then go on my way, because then I'll know. I'll keep doing that if I have to. I mean, I don't go all the way back. I just do the last 3. And that way, oops, I'm going on this side, I get a good consistent shape. Or decrease is really what I meant to say. This one will also need that. And what I do when I'm redotting or backdotting is I do it very lightly, okay? So that I can control. Now, if you lose track of where you are, just count your rows, right? So let me grab my pointer so I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3. So I know where I'm at. And I'm just showing you that so that you have a good way for yourselves, there's only one of you probably, to keep track of where you are. Okay, I'm going to run out on this one. So come back to number 1. Oops. Sometimes I spin and I lose track. I just keep spinning. I think that's like another metaphor for life, isn't it? All right. And then now I'm just going to do one more. It's going to go back to the white. And I'm going to, not shockingly, do tip 6. Okay. Now, if you run into get close to your blue, darker blue spoke here, or ray, just stop, okay? Not a big deal, not a problem at all. Everybody's got a different hand. Some people might have run into this, if you will, sooner, okay? Not a big deal. Okay, that's kind of the point. If you didn't run into it, then you can go all the way around, okay? But this came out very even. I think for me, the key thing, you can, I guess, only have one key thing, is to make sure you're starting. I'm going to point it to you, so I'm just going to let me finish my dots here so I can talk. Concentrate. Is to try to keep your line aligned. Okay, these lines straight. Make sure your starting point is on that etched line, because that adds a lot to the design when you do that. Okay, so that's your teardrops. And now we're going to work, I'm going to introduce you to the world of dragging. So dragging, we're actually going to drag with tip number 8. And what a drag is I'm just going to bring this back to show you, is this. So we've got all of this done, and we've got this done, all of this, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to do this. I'm going to start here. I'm going to put my tip here. And then after I sort of drip the paint down, I'm going to take a little pressure off of my tip, and I'm going to then pull it into here. Now, sometimes you'll make it all the way to the end, particularly on some of these. It depends on the color that you're using, as well as how much paint you got on it, etc. Different glazes have different viscosities. So if it's a thinner viscosity, it's likely to be able to travel more. If it's thicker, it might only make it this far, and I'm going to show you how you do the tail if you, quote-unquote, run out of glaze on your tip. That's important because it'll help you, give you the best shot at retaining your shape. You can, by the way, grab a piece of scrap paper if you want to start and just practice doing these. You don't have to do it right on your plate to start with. So we're going to take the light blue, and we're going to start at about, we're going to be fitting 3 drags in here, successively smaller. So we're going to start at about the second dot, and I'm going to place it, then I'm going to lift it up slightly, and I'm going to just keep pulling till nothing more happens. That's it. So even if I only got it that far, what I'm going to do then is switch to tip 1. Because this is such a long one, I am going to add a little bit of color to my tip. And I'm just going to come in here, all right? And I'm just going to start up here and keep pulling it down. But you always want to go to tip number 1 for this. You don't have to go all the way in. Like, this is about as far as I want to go with that. But that's a way to pull that tail out a little bit without messing with the integrity of your shape. So I'm going to do that again on the next one. I'm going to start at about the second one, plop it down, kind of let it drip a little, lift it up. So I'm still dragging, but not with a ton of pressure. And you know what? When it stops dragging naturally, just stop. Add a little bit of that color to your number 1 tip. Come on back and just keep pulling it down. Nice and gentle. There's only 4 of these, so don't stress about, you know, oh no, this takes so long. This is the only one that's quote-unquote hard to do. So it looks like that's what I did on this one, as I stopped it at about the 3rd from the bottom. So that's what I'm going to do on this one. Start at the second one, let it drip, lift it up a little, pull. That's all I'm going to get out of that one. So I'm going to use my number 1 tip, come up here with it, add some more paint, and just drag it down. Okay, and then the last one. Oops, I can't remember what color I used for that one. Okay, that's what that's going to look like. In fact, that is what it looks like. And now we're going to do the dark blue next to it. Now you can do the dark blue with the same tip. You can use the same number 8 tip, or you can come down to the number 7. This one is going to start a little bit lower, And it's going to end, well, I'm going to go down to the tip number 7 on this just because I think it'll show better. So I'm going to start that one here. And then same thing, if I run out, I'm going to still go back and switch to number 1. And, ooh, that's a beautiful design, but I want it to be a little longer, so I'm going to come do it again. There we go. So it ends a little shorter. It's almost like there's a line there. All right, so I'm going to come around and do that over here. So I'm actually using tip number 7 on this one. Let it drip and come on down. See, oops. Take my tip number 1 in that dark blue and go back in and pull it. Okay. That one was my bad. I did not wait. So I'm going to get a slightly different look on this one, which won't matter in the long run. That's what I like about these. That's what I go for in these designs, is things that are somewhat forgiving. They look very precise, and in some ways they are, but they can also be very forgiving when you put the whole plate together. Okay, and that's the dark blue. So that was tip number 7. And now we're going to down to tip number 6. I know that doesn't probably come as a surprise to you. And we're going to go to the white, and we're going to do a little drag with tip number 6 next to it. Kind of the same idea. All right, so we're kind of coming down here. It's likely that you'll be able to get this whole thing on one drag, because by the time you get to these short ones with tip 6 should give you enough. Now, the other thing is that you're going to do you're going to do the same thing on the other side. I tend to do all of my drags on the same side first, because my hand, I'm a big fan of muscle memory. So my point is, what I'm going to do is now I'm going to do the other side like this. Now, let me tell you something. So if I'm left-handed, I guess I did the left side. You might be right-handed, and maybe you did the right side, or maybe you tried to copy me and do the left side. Either way, what I'm going to do, instead of what I did up here, which is I started at the top and came down, I'm actually going to do these backwards from here because it's more comfortable for my hand. So I start this first one with the light blue. If you remember, at the second dot, let it drain and come down, and then keep filling it. If you run out, grab some more. Also, what happens is, as you get further down in your glaze supply in your pod, you're also likely to pick up different amounts of glaze. So you will also find, perhaps, that a certain kind of a dip that you did originally doesn't work as well toward the end. And you should not feel like that's anything other than normal. So just have to go in, and that's why I wanted to show you this trick, to pull it down all the way with the tip number 1. For me, the hardest part of all of this is remembering the difference between the white and the light blue so that I don't accidentally use the wrong one. So it actually requires me to somewhat pay attention. Go figure. All right. So this is really just doing the same thing that we did on the other side. And now we're going to switch to tip 7 and the darker blue. I'm going to come down a little bit. All right. I know it can be tempting to think that you should just use the same tip again, but I'm here to tell you not to do that, because it'll just be a thick Sad, sad mess. Once it's in there, it's like once you've come up, you just do not put that same tip back. Just suck it up and go down to tip 1. Okay, do the right thing, and you'll be happier. And then the last one, of course, is tip 6 with the white. And that's that nice, cute little shorty. This will make you really happy to do these short little ones. You just zip on in. Okay? Actually gonna... Okay. All right, so that is that, as they say. And what I did then for my design was I just came up at the end of each of these and added a number 8 dot. Now, depending upon you and your hand and whether your design is all tight or spread out and loose, you might be going up onto the curvature of your plate by now, okay? So that's important. You want to take that into consideration. So if you're going to do that, what I did was I took a tip 8 with a white and put that above the blue. Okay, so I'm going to do 4 of those, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the blue above the center line of the white dots. So if I'm above blue, I'm going to take my white. But my point is that I want to hold my plate so that where I'm dotting is basically parallel to the table, okay, so that it's a flat surface. And just put my dot there and just give it a second to set. One of the cool things about working with the glazes on the pottery is the water in the glaze absorbs and dries pretty quickly, certainly quickly enough that the dot isn't going to go anywhere. So I just give it I don't know, I didn't count. How many seconds was that, do you think? All right, so I'm just going to count now for you. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. So that's 10 seconds, and I'm keeping my eye on this dot, but also on this dot, and I can see that there's some little bit of movement, so I'm just going to be patient. What I'm doing is I'm now moving it for a second so that this is parallel, so that both of them are kind of a little bit flatter. I just would, you know, for the sake of 10 or 20 seconds, I'd rather be safe rather than, you know, sorry, my usual impetuous approach. So there's that one. Those are pretty stable now. And then I'm just going to do the last one because watching my paint dry is not that interesting to you. But I'm telling you that for yours, give yourself a break, go a little bit slower if you need to. And then I'm just going to do the same thing except using the dark blue above the whites. Okay? And again, I'm doing the same thing where I'm holding it so that when I put the dot down, okay, so I'm just gonna give it a second. I'm gonna, well, let's see, what can I do? I don't have anything that bled together on this, so I'm gonna fake it. Sorry, I didn't make any mistakes. Ooh, that sounds certainly kind of passive-aggressive, doesn't it? Well, let's pretend I have a couple of dots that ran into each other. You want to wait until the dots are completely dry. And to be honest, you want to wait until all of your dots are dry, because what'll happen is you're going to scrape a dot. I can't remember if I had a dot. I thought, okay, let's put this one then. This one maybe is a tiny bit whack, but it's also wet, so I don't want to mess with it. Shoot. All right, but what you would do is if you had 2 dots that ran together, we'll just pretend, you're going to very likely find some sort of a scraping tool. It could be your number 1 tip of your dotting tool can work. A toothpick works great. A file works great. But because you're not going to scrape very hard. You're just going to barely touch the surface. And what I'm doing is essentially, if there was white in between on here, I'm just basically scraping the white away. You don't want to go too deep. You don't want to pull up black if you can help it. And ultimately, you're going to have to blow that whatever you scrape, that blow that glaze dust off of there. And that's why I suggest you wait till the whole thing is completely dry, because if I blow it off now, it could end up in this wet paint, and then I can't get it out of there. So wait till it's dry, do the, a tiny bit of a scrape, blow, you'll be fine. It's not that hard. All right, so you're gonna wait till your piece is completely dry. You're going to put it back in the little plastic bag it came in, pack up your pods, keep your tool that you either already own or have purchased, and bring it back. Oh, don't forget your slip, okay, that was in your package, because that helps us keep track of your piece. And we'll get that fired for you, and it'll be back in your hands, beautiful and shiny, within a week. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed making the Snow Burst plate.